discussing topics that are really relevant. Well, they're relevant anytime, but they're especially relevant in through here. As I was going through my recipes today, contemplating what goodies I was going to make over the next 2 weeks, I must confess they all had sugar in it. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to our founder, Dr. Randall Maxey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Neighbors Stevens, Dr. Walks, Dr. Hines, and we have our special guest. We've always talked for the past 2+ years about the importance of nutrition and what you eat. And I'm reminded of a title of a gentleman they called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who wrote a book years ago called You Are What You Eat. Is that what the name of it was? You are what you eat?
I believe that is so. That's correct.
Okay. But at any rate, I remember being medical director of 2 religious conferences. One was the National Baptist Convention USA, and I admitted 286 people over a 4-day period to the hospital with various types of heart failure, uncontrolled hypertension, pulmonary edema, etc. A few weeks later, I was a medical director for the Black Muslims, the Nation of Islam. And in my health station, I saw 2 people. One had a cut finger and one had tripped, but there were no medical admissions required. And need I say that there's a whole lot of difference in the 2 groups, but the main difference was the way that people ate. And we know with the virus that's been going on, the various health disparities that we've seen, of how important it is to dietarily be correct. But we want to be very practical today and look at some of the things that people are eating. And we're going to discuss a range of topics. The first topic is going to be, some of us have tried to eat artificial foods. And Miss Frances Tillery, who's been a friend of mine for years, is a registered dietitian. She's also attended nursing school. She is currently a dietitian for the hardest group of people I believe there are. She is a dietitian for a company called DaVita, and she sees the sickest of the sick. But I asked Ms. Tillery if she would give us insight on some of the things that we know are going on with this Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat. I know I ate one of those hamburgers a few weeks ago, and I said, it's impossible. This could not be plant-based. But Ms. Frances Tillery, welcome to the Black Health Trust, and we'd appreciate you talking to us about what you know about food and Impossible Meat and Beyond Meat. Ms. Tillery.
I really want to thank you for this opportunity to be able to be here today and to speak about this. It was quite interesting, even for me doing my research on these plant-based companies. So without further ado, we can probably get ready to start, especially on Beyond Meat, which is the one of the first companies I'd like to speak about.
Go to the first slide, Simon. Go to the next slide for me. Mm-hmm.
So Beyond Meat is a Los Angeles-based company, and it is located in El Segundo. They also have other locations. They are a producer of plant-based meat substitutes, which was founded in 2009. The product was actually launched in 2012. They are made with simple ingredients such as peas, brown rice, mung bean, faba bean. They're without GMO and no added hormones or antibiotics. However, I do want to note that they do have at least about 5 chemicals that they place in their meat products. I'm going to give you just 2 of them, but one is magnesium carbonate and one is propyl glycol, which is another product, and some of these are actually added to the product. Peas are also legumes, and so people with allergies to legumes like peanuts, they should be cautious when eating for any pea allergies. They also recommend that you don't eat their meat raw, and so that's very important. They contain no soy, gluten, or tree nuts. When comparing that Beyond Meat nutritional value, well, let's look at it from a 4-ounce product that's uncooked. So the calories is about 270 calories. The fat is about 20 grams. Now, I want you to note when I'm saying this, because I want you to note this as I continue to go on. It contains 6 grams of saturated fat. Protein, we know it's a high source of protein, which is 20 grams. There is no cholesterol. And I want you to note this as well. Sodium is 380 milligrams. Carbohydrates, about 5 grams. And fibers, about 3 grams. So when we look in terms of Impossible Foods was developed, it's a plant-based substitute for meat products. Impossible Burger. It was launched in 2016 in partnership with Burger King. It's called the Impossible Whopper. It was released in 2019, and the company goal is for growing animal-derived products in a lab. Next, we need to note that it's made from soy concentrate gluten, which is a sugar-free, which it's gluten-free and it has no wheat. The fat is from sunflower oil and coconut oil. So if you actually look at the burger, you're going to see like this white coloring on top and some of these specks of white. That is from the sunflower oil and the coconut oil. It has, the flavor comes from a GE heme, which is what's in the product. It's a molecule. It has a color, it adds color additive, and it gives it a meaty taste. It's also FDA approved. But one of the things that I was also looking at, they also have this process, and it's called FBS. FBS is a fetal bovine serum. And this is what, again, it's not on here. I didn't put it in your notes, but I'm giving this to you. It's called fetal bovine serum. It's created by using the blood from cow fetuses. And so this is actually added into this heme and into their products, which they actually use. When we think in terms of Impossible Burger's nutritional value, so we look at it for 4 ounces at Burger King. The calorie is 240, proteins 19 grams, fat 14 grams, saturated fat, again, please note 8 grams of saturated fat, a carbohydrate 9 grams and 3 grams of fiber. Please note sodium 370 milligrams. The difference between Beyond and Impossible, they both produce vegetarian substitutes to ground meat using plant-based ingredients, and they're highly processed foods. So again, I mentioned some of those processed foods that those processing that they actually use. Impossible Food uses, again, the heme molecule to make meat taste, make it tasty, which again, that protein is heme, but it is from a root soil plant, and it's inserted into it genetically. So this is an engineered yeast that they actually place this in. So you're really getting a lot of engineered food. And again, that goes with their goal. Beyond Meat is a little bit more expensive than Impossible. It's possibly due to the government subsidies that go into the meat industry and helping to keep the cost down. This is to be noted that when you compare the meat burger they contain, when you compare the meat-based burger, which is the cow, they both contain the same amount of saturated fat and more sodium. So when you actually look at this, both of these products, they have a lot more sodium, and the saturated fat is almost comparable to that of just regular meat or meat burgers from meat base. Now we have to question the health risks. The health risks you have to be concerned about. What about strokes, as well as when you're looking at cardiovascular issues, because these products definitely have the saturated fat and they also have a little bit more sodium. So this is the plant-based compared to the lean beef. Beef, this is ground beef. This is chuck, which is about 80% meat, and then you lean, and then 20% of the fat. So this is about 4 ounces. You can see that the calories here is only 287 calories. Total fat, 23 grams. But when we look at saturated fat, that's 8.6 grams. That's pretty much the same as you're thinking in terms of your plant-based meats. The protein is 19 grams. It's pretty comparable. Cholesterol, 80 grams. The other ones didn't have cholesterol. But let's look at sodium, which is very important. This has 75 grams of sodium by comparing the other two, which is a lot higher. Carbohydrates, they aren't. So I looked at an RD review, and it isn't necessarily healthier than actual beef burgers. It's more sustainable and offer good sources of plant-based protein for those who are strictly on plant-based diets only. So when we see that, again, can you place both of these? Can be offered in a diet, but I would think that, again, it's a matter of your choice. When what is it that you're actually going to be looking at? And then we really have to look at the health factors. Next slide. So the plant-based company products, Beyond Meat makes chicken nuggets. They have a popcorn chicken. They have sheared steak tips and more. Here's something that I wanted to tell you. Beyond Steak new product, their goal, this is not in here in your slide, but their goal is to increase revenue for the year of 2023. And so this Beyond Steak has about 21 grams of protein. It has no cholesterol, decrease on the saturated fat, no antibiotics or hormones. It has water, wheat gluten, faba bean, canola oil, salt, garlic, and onion powder, pomegranate concentrate, yeast extract, sunflower, lecithin, fruit and vegetable juice for color. So this is their new product that they're looking to come out for the year of 2023. It is branded. It is a branded product. You can find it in many, many stores. So it's about 180,000 retail and food service that are actually carrying Beyond Meat, and they have them in all different types of products. So you will, it is readily available for individuals who choose to have that. Impossible Food has also come out with chicken nuggets, sausages, meatballs, and more. And again, they are available in a lot of other stores as well. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about here is when you talk about Beyond Meats, we think in terms of health issues. One of the health issues is that in cardiac, they're looking at, and cancer, they're looking at to see how healthy some of these products are. And one of the things is to be noted that the American Cancer Society has been looking at what can they do to help decrease the amount of cancers, especially with meat-based products. But the American Cancer Society does not endorse or support any of these products. So when we're thinking in terms of that, many people will think, well, these are quite healthy, and you'll hear claims about what the Cancer Society is saying, but they have not come out and endorsed any of these products as of yet. Recommendation for a healthy lifestyle goal. I think that we really need to bump up the fiber intake and eat a lot more whole grains and nuts. Limit added sugar, cut back on a lot of sodium. Now I put 3,500 milligrams. The average individual takes in about somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams a day. The recommendation may be that it is considered that about 2,300 milligrams of sodium would be average for most Americans, but that's what we really consider a low sodium diet. And when we're really looking at that, my question would be, how many individuals would really follow a low sodium diet, given the fact that they take in about 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams of sodium on a daily basis? So when we're thinking in terms of a no added salt diet, it runs about 3,000 to 3,500. So I've just kind of put on the upper limits of where that recommendation should actually be. Avoid a lot of processed foods. You want to drink water and stay hydrated. And again, limit your sugary drinks. A lot of these sugar drinks contains a lot of sugar, but it's also having a lot of calories, in which many people are consuming. Increase fruits and vegetables, aim for a variety of colors. Again, we want to look at all of the different reds and all of the different fruits and vegetables. On an average, if you were to ask many individuals how many fruits and vegetables that they would actually be consuming on a daily basis, many of them would probably say less than 4. And so we have, as dietitians, that is one of the biggest goals in which many individuals are trying to get individuals to consume a lot more fruits and vegetables. And I'm not saying consume them in packages or pills or something, but in actually eating and consuming the real foods of fruits and vegetables. Using extra virgin olive oil is also very helpful. Next slide. I wanted to recommend, when we're looking at plant-based foods, but again, there's another option that we have, and that option could be having a meatless meal at least 1 to 2 times a week, just having a vegetarian eat many vegetables and fruits and other foods where you don't have to have meat at all. I tried that personally. I was trying it with an individual who is quite sick, and we're looking at cardiac issues and possibility being an AKI for kidney issues, and I suggested it, and that didn't really go over well at all. He thought that I was overstepping my boundaries by suggesting that. So that is still an area that many individuals are not willingly ready to give up a lot of meat. Measure and watch your weight. I think that's very important. When I'm saying measure your waistline circumferences. And then watch your weight. You can actually determine your weight size and see the difference and judge that by your clothes size. You could actually see if your clothes size are actually going up. When you actually get on a scale, we know that muscle weighs more than fat. So, but again, paying attention to your weight, watching your measurements, look at yourself, and no one can do that better than you. Fasting and praying. I am a big advocate and a very strong advocate for fasting and praying. So again, whether you're having a fast, it could be in the morning, and you can fast for whether it's on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, whether you're skipping the first 2 meals, it depends on, is that a water fast? Those are very, very helpful. There's a lot of new literature that's now coming out about fasting and being able to question that in the healthcare industry, if as well in the, I'm sorry, in the, not just in the healthcare industry, but also in the healthcare industry, are we looking at individuals about them fasting? There was an article I read about fasting and then patients discussing that with their doctors about fasting. Many doctors felt that that may have been an area that they might not have wanted to go into because they were looking at spiritual issues, and each individual had different spiritual values. Go easy on alcohol and stay sober. We know that we have a society that is extremely abusive when it comes down to alcohol and drugs. As we see, we have an industry when we have a lot of alcohol. And so the question is what is considered to be healthy when we think in terms of having alcohol? Is 1 glass a day, or 2 or 3 glasses of wine, or different types of alcohol? So again, an individual would know when you're consuming, or especially if you're consuming and you're not sober. Avoid drugs. That's an area, again, in which many people don't want to talk about, but in nutrition, it's very important. As I would have the opportunity in dealing with a lot of different patients, I also look at all of their urine studies, and as I also look at the toxicology studies, because the toxicology studies also determine if some of these individuals have drugs in their system, which has also been an ability for me to help to care for some of them who actually have drugs. Exercise regularly and be physically active. I mean, that's very important. So we're talking about really, let's move. Let's move. Are we actually exercising on a regular basis and being physically active? Are we looking at someone who's on an average of 30 to 45 minutes a day being involved in some type of physical activities, or when we're looking in terms of a weekly basis, or 3 or 4 or 5 times a week in which you're actually physically active and getting up and moving? I deal with a lot of patients who are sometimes not able to, whether they're wheelchair bound or have issues with gait. I still encourage them to try to do some type of physical activities, whether they're sitting in the chair. There are many different things that I have tried to educate them on, whether you're taking a soda bottle and you're putting water in it and you're using that for strengthening exercises, or while they're watching television. There are different types of things in which they can actually do, lifting their legs, which is extremely important. And getting enough sleep. Many individuals are not just sleeping. So as a result, if you're not really sleeping well, and on the average of about 8 hours, when you're not sleeping as well, we see that there are many, many side effects from a lack of sleep. Individuals are more moody, digestion process, all of these different things occur because they're just not getting enough sleep. And we really need to look at, are they really getting true sleep when they get REM sleep? Again, this is my recommendation on a healthy lifestyle, and I think that that's extremely important, that we really want to look and consider some of those factors.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tillery, for your very interesting and inspiring message. But I have 2 questions. How does it taste, and do you recommend Beyond Meat or Impossible Burgers?
I didn't prefer it. Okay. And again, that was my taste because it is questionable on what you like. I'm not a really big meat eater anyway. So, but again, it's a matter of preference or taste. I would recommend it for those individuals, again, who are on plant-based diets. But again, another thing that I want, are you really looking for food taste? Are you looking for health? What are you looking for when you're actually looking at, as I mentioned, the different types of chemicals that are now being added? And then when you think in terms of the heme that's being added into the Impossible food product, you want to consider all of these. One of the things about—
So heme, is that blood?
one of the things about Beyond Meat, also know that there are various issues that are not coming out. You know that the chief operating officer has been suspended because of some issues that they were having. And one of their plants in one of the other areas was brought under concern because of the plant itself had bacterial issues. And so they were being considered, looked at. And this is all in 2022. So be aware that the chief operating officer, his name was Doug Ramsey, has been suspended immediately for issues outside of hitting somebody and other issues that are going on within the company.
Dr. Stevens, you and I talk about cooking and food all the time. What do you think about some of this stuff she was talking about?
Well, I have had concerns about Impossible Meat and Beyond Meat because I do cook. And when you cook, you tend not to use a lot of additives. And it just kind of bothered me that there were so many different things in Impossible Meat and Beyond Meat. I've tried both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that, and I have had the Impossible Whopper. I don't prefer it. Now, if I'm making a decision because I don't want to eat meat, but I have a taste for meat, it might meet that situation. But on a regular basis, it's not something that I choose to eat.
Now their product line is very large because they do have enchiladas and shepherd pie, meatloaf, sausage, chicken nuggets, meatballs. They also have a very large recipes in which you can actually put them, which they are actually using. So their product lines are, really large. Thrive is a market that contains a lot of their products. And now you're seeing them in Vons and Ralph's and a lot of other products that actually contain these plant-based meats. Again, I think that the issue in which we're really looking at, we're a society that is looking at to say, well, how can we solve or what can we do to help reduce so many of these healthcare issues and problems? And so many individuals, or this is a company that's coming out and say, well, we can produce this product and now hopefully we're going to help to reduce issues like cardiovascular disease, strokes. Maybe this is going to help with cancer. Maybe we're going to look at this is going to be an issue for diabetes and high blood pressure. So companies are now coming out because of the great issues that we are seeing with and especially in minority communities, but across the board with a lot of healthcare issues and a lot of these issues that we saw because of COVID. Many individuals who had COVID had all of these other medical issues, which definitely created a lot more problems for many of them.
The other advantage, well, maybe advantage isn't too strong a word. Another argument for the adoption of use of these kinds of products is the environmental argument. The dairy industry and the beef industry are huge contributors to
your footprints. You're looking at this
production of CO2 and methane. And so if we back off of the use of real meat, we will decrease some of those emissions, and that will go a long way to helping us meet our global warming goals that we need to pay attention to.
Yes, and I agree, but I also would say that when we actually look at that, so as individuals, if we spend a little bit more time looking at our overall health and having more of a selection, these products, again, may be usable. But again, if we consume less of the meats and when we are looking at environmental issues, the question would be, can we reduce the amount? When we reduce the amount of meat and other products that we're in, looking at other alternatives. Again, whether you're vegetarian or looking at other, we can help decrease the entire issues with global and environmental issues by having more of a broad-based selection of what we actually do eat.
Mr. Wofford has made the observation about the cost of these products compared to meat-based products, but that is not an unusual trend, because if you think about it, if the price difference in what you pay for organic foods versus non-organic foods has been quite a differential for a long time, if in fact it's available to the Black community as far as being conveniently located. So we have a lot of issues around food and availability of food and quality of food, in addition to intelligent choice of food.
I agree. Now, one of the concerns is that we also have to be concerned about when many foods that they state are organic, and some of them are not actually organic. And you'll have many individuals saying, well, this is our organic product, and there's concerns about, are they actually organic? So those are other issues as concern. Again, if we're actually looking at in some of our communities growing our own food and fruits and vegetables, they're starting to have, again, that is, I think, more viable. I recall being at the World Food Day, which was in Milan, Italy, in 2016. There, they had an opportunity when we're looking at the entire world and the globe of what's going on with food and issues all around the globe. One of it was quite interesting is being able to grow your own fruits and vegetables, even when you live in a small area, an apartment or something like that. There are options in which you can actually be able to grow your own fruits and vegetables, which would be highly more beneficial to many individuals, especially in those in socially disadvantaged areas. So being able to know how to produce some of your own foods and be able to use them could be quite helpful.
Dr. Walsh, what do you think?
I'm trying to figure out what it is that we want to tell folks in the community. I was looking at what Tony Wofford put in the chat, not only about the cost, but also about helping folks learn how to shop better. And I still don't know if I have the resources, if I eat the Impossible Meat, the Beyond Meat products, other than lowering cholesterol, how are these products helping me in terms of my health? What are the advantages? How is my body going to be healthier 6 months from now, a year from now, if I eat these products?
I think it helps the cows.
Well, yeah, so does eating at Chick-fil-A, but I'm trying to figure out what it is that we can tell people, you know, if you eat these, for example, I'm very comfortable telling my patients that I want you to exercise regularly. And I mean, there are basic things like that that people can understand, I can understand, and I can look at the health benefits of, and I'm trying to put this in that category. So first of all, Ms. Tillery, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. And from a dietitian perspective, what is it that you would tell someone, you do this and you're going to get better?
Okay. The number one thing that I actually tell people, for me, I asked them, the first question I asked them is, how important is their health? How important is your health? And on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you place your health? And then I want to know, after that, I want to know, where do they want me to go? And again, if your health is not that important and you say it's a 5, and you have a lot of other values, then I can give you some information. But if your health is a 10 and you're really concerned about your overall health, then I'm going to want to know, what are you eating? And what is it that you want to know? So the other thing is, what are you actually eating? How often do you eat fruits and vegetables? How often are you eating carbohydrates? How often do you go shopping? All of the, how much water do you drink? What health issues do you have? What are your health concerns? So again, those are definitely some of my areas in which I spend time with a lot of patients, and especially in the Afro-American communities, as well as other minority communities. My biggest concern at this point in time is that we're looking at obesity, and we're looking at diabetes, we're looking at high blood pressure. My concern is that many of these individuals who have these chronic medical conditions, they are now leading to kidney disease. And that's my biggest concern. So that if you're looking at that you have high blood pressure and it's not controlled, are you talking to your doctors about this? What are those types of things? What foods are you consuming, and what are you eating in your diet? Are you exercising, as you stated? Are you exercising? If you're having diabetes, are you concerned about it? What is it that you know about diabetes? How controlled is your blood sugars? Because the issues with diabetes is when you're having high blood sugars that are basically uncontrolled. So those uncontrolled blood sugars, when you couple that with hypertension and the obesity, we're now seeing issues that are leading to kidney disease. And so that is one of the major concerns I'm having, that if you notice that on every corner, you're seeing dialysis centers.
So let me ask a question. So you don't necessarily, if I understand you right, recommend these artificial meats, but if somebody wants to do it and has the budget, you're saying it may not have a bad effect. Is that correct?
I'm saying that it may not. If that's your choice and you believe, then I'm not. Again, I wanted to bring to the point, as when we talked about Beyond Meat as well as Impossible, when we looked at the burger, that's why I made the statement, be very careful when you looked at it, the amount of saturated fat, it was comparable to that of lean beef. If you were talking about 80-20%, if you were thinking in terms of, when we looked at it, we looked at the sodium content, that the sodium content in both of those areas were much higher than if you were actually talking about lean beef. So when we think in terms of those two areas, when we think in terms of those products, you're talking about a high protein, but let's look at the saturated fats and the sodium content. Both of those were comparable or had greater, they were higher in sodium and they're comparable to the saturated fat. They were basically the same.
So are there any questions or comments in the chat we need before we move to our next segment?
Dr.
So,
Sherrod
Ms.
has.
Hillary, I'm going to show a few slides. I'd like you to stick around if you want to address some of them with me. I'd appreciate it. Simon, can you put up that second?
Dr. Maxey, Dr. Sherrod had her hand up.
Dr. Sherrod, go ahead.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Ms. Tillery for such a great lecture this morning. And I have several questions and one point, or maybe several points to make. I think we have to understand that the plant-based meats are also processed foods, which you pointed out so elegantly, and you have to be concerned about sodium content in all processed foods. And in general, processed foods are not recommended as a good substitute because of the high sodium content. And I think the recommendation that you made about meatless meals 2 to 3 times a week may work for our community. One, because of the cost, and many of them cannot afford those plant-based products. Now, I actually tried them myself because I have some major health challenges. I tried the Beyond Burgers, and they taste good. They taste just like meat, but after a couple meals of consumption, I broke out in a rash all over. So there are a lot of stuff in there that you are not even aware of and you may be sensitive to. But the other thing too, when we consider organic versus inorganic, we also have to keep in mind that the farming techniques in the United States over a period of time has depleted the soil of minerals. So even if you're eating organic, you're still not getting enough nutrients from the food. So you still have to supplement your diet because of that. And then you have to worry whether it's more beneficial. Do you have the money? Because organic foods tend to cost more. Is it cost effective to do the organic, or should you just go with your supplementation? Because whether it's organic or inorganic, they're all nutritionally depleted. And the third thing is we never think of, when we think of eating, we think of what we put in our mouth, but what you put on your skin is also like eating. Everything you put on your skin is like eating it. So we have to also be aware of the products that we're using to saturate our skin, our face, the cosmetics, the toothpaste. Everything is chemically laden and can be a challenge to your health. And I was wondering if you have done any talking on skin products and cosmetics and toothpaste, and all of those things are contribute to our health.
No, I haven't done any talks on them, but I have spent time looking and researching that, and you're absolutely correct that there is a great concern with a lot of the skin products. And the reason why is because the beauty industry now, as we spend so much more money on beauty, so a lot of them have processed and chemicals that are actually added. For example, if you look lipstick, to make the lipstick stay on more, it's more brighter. So there's more chemicals that are actually added to all of that. The eyelash products and all of these different types of products have a lot more chemicals and other things that are being added to them. And that is a big concern. There is a concern that Afro-American women are maybe having some greater issues with hair care products, especially when they're dyeing their hair, because some of these products with the hair care products, we dye our hair a little bit more frequent than others, and some of them are creating other concerns for some cancers and things that I had actually read. The other thing is that I wanted to reiterate again, and one was on it, is that when we think in terms of impossible foods, we think in terms of that heme product. One of the things, again, that I read, it said that in the processing that they use is called FBS, which is the fetal bovine serum. That was quite interesting to me because it's created by using blood from the cow's fetus.
Ooh.
You don't want any cow, but you're using the blood from the cow fetus in order to use this, and it's called FBS. And I think a lot of us are not concerned about that issue. And that was one of the bigger things that, again, when we're looking at plant-based things, the things that we don't know that's actually put into it. We're moving towards an issue when you think in terms of that. Do you really want to know for the future generation that most of your foods are going to be growing in a lab? Where are we going now? When we think in overall society, where are we actually moving to, where you're getting away from foods that were brought up in your family, and now you're eating foods that are actually being grown in a lab? How do you do that? Will they be growing? How are you going to get greens grown in a lab, or, you know, all of these other things, holidays coming up? And so when you get around to sit down to the holiday, you're going to sit down and everybody's going to pull out all of these chemically grown foods or being served, and everybody's going to be concerned about their health issues because we're looking at, well, Christmas is coming. And so I'm not going to tell anybody that I have all of these plant-based or artificial foods, that I've actually surprised them and given them to them. And that's going to be kind of funny. And so then all people walk away and, well, what did we have? Well, we tell you a little bit later that we gave you all of these chemically grown foods and that you had them. That turkey wasn't the turkey, and the chicken that you didn't have wasn't chicken. And so those are some of the things that are kind of funny that we're going to be looking at. And for the children growing up, what are their health issues and their concerns?
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Tillery. Simon, can you put up this second set of slides, label Maxie? And Ms. Tillery, I'm going to go through them, and I want you to comment on them with me as we go through. Dr. Walks and Dr. Neighbor-Stevens may help me read these. So I want to talk a bit about sugar. And too much added sugar can be one of the greatest threats to cardiovascular disease. We don't know all the reasons that sugar is bad for the heart, but some of them are noted in some of the slides that are coming up. If you have diabetes, in many ways, your diet is your medicine. And when foods are high in carbohydrates, fats, and sodium, they increase your risk for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, weight gain, and therefore heart disease and uncontrolled sugar. Can I have the next slide, please? So sugar does occur naturally in all foods that contain carbohydrates, such as fruits, vegetables, grains, and dairy. Consuming whole foods that contain natural sugar is thought to be okay. Plant foods also have high amounts of fiber, essential minerals, and antioxidants, and foods contain protein and calcium. So we know, and Ms. Tillery did speak about eating colors, and we know that Seneca Ballman colors things like eggplants, but the more colors you have in your food, they're better. And I tell people, a lot of people are into juicing, but it's better to eat the fruit and the vegetables without necessarily juicing, which removes all that fiber from it. So we know that when the body digests these foods slowly, the sugar doesn't bounce up and down as much as it would. And that sugar damage that causes inflammation and plaque and other things is more pronounced if you have wide swings in your blood sugar. Next slide, please. So the real problem is added sugar. And added sugar is what the manufacturer puts into the product to make it more palatable or taste better. It's the same thing we talked about when a mother has a new baby and she gives him beech nut baby food or whatever that other stuff is, and adds butter and sugar and nature seasoning to her taste. And that starts to imprint that baby's tongue and memory to eating food that's not healthy. In the American diet, the top sources for added sugar are fruit drinks, soft drinks, flavored cereals, cookies, cakes, candy, and mostly processed foods, which that actually defined. So too much consumption of added sugar leads to a higher death rate. So we need to be concerned about that. The average adult man takes in 24 teaspoons of added sugar per day. And that's bad. Next slide, please. That's an additional almost 400 calories. Next slide, please. Well, the impact on the heart. There was a study done in 2014 published in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, Internal Medicine, found an association between a high sugar diet and a greater risk of death from heart disease. And over this 15 years study, it showed that people who get between 17 to 21% versus 8% of their calories from added sugar had a higher death rate from cardiovascular disease, as much as 38% higher. So higher intake of added sugar leads to more death. Next slide. So it's not clearly understood how this all works, but if you're taking high amounts of sugar, it tends to overload the liver. The liver metabolizes sugar like it does alcohol, and this sugar converts into fat. And over time, this can turn into a fatty liver, and that can contribute to diabetes, hypertension, elevated blood pressure, and can be a bigger risk for heart disease. So we want to make sure you don't consume too much added sugar, which can raise your blood pressure again. It can also increase chronic inflammation. And both of these things are pathological pathways to heart disease. May I have the next slide, please? So how much added sugar is okay, is the right amount? The American Heart Association suggests that women consume no more than 100 calories of added sugar per day. That's about 6 teaspoons or 24 grams. And for men, no more than 100 calories or about 9 teaspoons a day or 36 grams of added sugar per day. Next slide. And the other point on the slide was this amounts to the same amount of sugar that's in 1 can of soda, or pop as we call it in the Midwest. But I know Miss Tiller will tell you when you go shopping, look at your food labels and see if it tells you what's in it. Because there's brown sugar, fruit juice, high fructose corn syrup, honey, invert sugar, molasses, and a number of things that not only do you want to stay away from them, but you want to make sure you don't eat too many servings of them. And I have always been told that brown sugar is better. I've been told that honey is better, but to me, honey is bee vomit, right? But it's just another form of sugar. Next slide. So total sugar is an issue. And we know that when you read your food labels, you want to look at how much sugar is it in terms of grams, but also not only do you want to know the grams per teaspoon, but how many servings that makes, and make sure you're not eating too many servings, because even though it may be a low amount added, if you eat 10 teaspoons of it, it may be too high. Next slide, please. So what are the worst foods for diabetics? Number 1 is sweetened drinks. These include sodas, fruit punch, iced teas that have sugar in them. And it's recommended that instead of using that, infuse them with plain water with different fruits so that you can enjoy that natural sweetness. You can put some unfiltered fruit juice in it. Or these designer drinks you get at Starbucks and the other places, including these frappuccinos and macchialinos or whatever they are, that instead of using that, those mixtures, use them either black or add a fruit sweetener or a small splash of skim milk. If you can't eat milk, you can switch to 2%, 1% or skim milk, or you can use one of the types of milk that you can get from rice or from soy or almond milk or oat milk, but make sure you use an unsweetened type of cream. Next slide. So again, back to the worst. My favorite food happens to be hot dogs. But these are high in saturated fat and sodium, and they include a lot of material that's bad for you, so you need to avoid them. So I'm all for hot dogs, Dr. Neighbor Stevens. I'm trying my best. So packaged lunch meat, that's bologna. And these are high sodium. You can ask if they have low sodium varieties, but basically these are bad for you too. The best thing, if you have to eat that sliced meat, roast your own turkey, cook it low sodium. But for those people who eat sandwiches, and my favorite thing had been Miracle Whip or mayonnaise. these are high calorie, unhealthy, high fat. So it's recommended that you use mustard, veggies, or even hummus in your food, not the mayonnaise. I told my wife when I first got married, let my refrigerator never have anything but Miracle Whip. That's dead now. I'm throwing everything out. I see you laughing, Dr. Weeks. Not to walk. Next slide, please. So again, sherbet, and this is something that I had a misbelief about. A lot of people, including Dr. Maxey, believed that sherbet was a good alternative to ice cream. But a half cup of sherbet has almost double the carbohydrates of a half cup of ice cream. So sherbet is not just water. It has more carbohydrates than does ice cream. Next slide, please. So again, anything fried. Fried foods are not good for anyone. This oil gets absorbed into the food and can lead to high cholesterol, weight gain, and it can worsen control of your diabetes. Everything from French fries to fried chicken to that panko crusted tilapia, all that's bad. If you're going to cook a chicken, broil it, boil it, but do not fry it. It's those oils that are bad. Or get an air fryer. Don't use deep fat fryers. All that oil gets into that food. Next slide. So there are some foods that are good. Sweet potatoes are great. It's a great source of vitamin C, potassium. You can add some cinnamon. That may help your blood glucose as well. Cloves, nutmeg, or allspice for extra flavor. And 1/2 of a cup of a cooked sweet potato equals 1 carb serving. Cruciferous vegetables. These include broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, and Brussels sprouts. And these non-starchy vegetables are good for you. They get full of potassium, folate, and vitamin C, and they taste good too. I'm going to have some cruciferous vegetables as soon as I get off to the broadcast. Legumes. Now, some people are allergic to these, but these are beans, such as black beans, garbanzo beans, lima, navy beans. I love navy beans, white beans, and they're loaded with fiber and protein. So those are good for you too. Next slide, please. So nuts. Even though I have a problem with nuts, I know they're good for you, especially walnuts, almonds, and pecans. And you want to consume a small amount because nuts are high density in terms of carbohydrates, but you can put them in salads, you can put them on oatmeal, yogurt, and 1 serving equals 1 carb serving. Next slide. That's the end. That'll be the end. Simon, that's the end. You can take them down. So just an idea that everything has sugar in it. You want to make sure that you're aware of what the manufacturer is putting in the food to make it more tasty. And you have to be careful that you don't eat too many servings of stuff like that. So I've become very conscious of, I love to drink apple juice and orange juice, and we need to cut all that stuff down. It's better to eat that orange with the fiber in it and the other natural foods. So Ms. Tillery, I'm interested in your take on some of the concepts about added sugar and some of the things sugar can do for you in a bad way. We also know that sugar is inflammatory. And what Ms. Tiller and I share in common, we both work in the field of dialysis and kidney failure. And you don't want to be on dialysis or have to have a kidney transplant if you don't have to. And for the past few weeks, I've been warning people, if they have diabetes, if they have early kidney disease or protein in their urine, they should have their urine albumin to creatinine ratio determined and discuss with their doctor, because you can stop blindness, you can stop kidney failure and other things by looking at not having too much sugar in your body. Ms. Tillery, any thoughts?
My thoughts are, I was listening to you and I'm thinking, how do we kind of work backwards? We think in terms of having obesity and high blood pressure, diabetes, and it leads to kidney disease. I just kind of wish that we could kind of work from kidney disease and work backwards. At this point in time, I believe that that's such a major issue. And so many people are unaware of the importance of maintaining having the blood sugars and all of these things under control. When you think in terms of kidney disease, I really like to make individuals aware that that's a 5-stage process. And in California, when you mentioned about transplant, but people may not be aware that in California that the time for a transplant's up to 10 years. And so when you have so many family individuals who you're thinking in terms of how can they get a donor, if the rest of your family are not healthy, they're not able to give to be on the transplant, to give a transplant. We're thinking in terms of now, you're looking at almost 10 years out before you can even get a transplant. And in that process, you look at the complete deterioration of their bodies. And all of these things are not reversible. And so you see that so many are sitting here and now they're coming and having to wait for 10 years and their entire lives are changed. Marriages are being destroyed, families broken apart, psychological issues. All of these patients are depressed, and half of them don't see psychiatrists or anybody else to really discuss any of these issues. And so for me, there's such a great issue, especially in the Afro-American communities, where if we can only get individuals to fully understand and invest in their health a little bit more, and to fully understand the importance of their life and their health. That is the number one area of concern, is their health. Starting at children at a young ages and letting them know how important, maybe considering even books or whatever for just healthy issues. But there has to be a definite area of concern in how we basically look at these health problems that are basically tearing apart so much of the Afro-American communities and other communities of color.
Okay, I'm going to just give a couple more statistics. African Americans make up approximately 13% of the population in America. But we make up almost 40% of all the patients on dialysis. And there's approximately 600,000 people on dialysis in the United States. And 40% of those are African Americans, who only make up 13% of the population. Now, there's another figure that's even worse. So if there's 600,000 people or so on dialysis itself, there's almost another 30 million that are in various stages moving towards kidney failure and dialysis. And a large percentage of those, most of them are African American. So this is a very serious problem. And of those people on dialysis, more than 30% are on because of diabetes. And somewhere around 25% are on because of high blood pressure. So these are very significant issues. So Dr. Walks and Dr. Neighbors-Stephens, where do we go from here? We have any questions or comments in the chat? Or
I just wanted to make one more comment. And on that, when you're speaking in terms of diet, it is the most restrictive diet that anyone can have, because you're not able to eat potatoes and bananas and so many of these issues that when we think in terms of them, their diet has now changed because of the diabetes and because of hypertension, and because now you're looking at a kidney diet. So many of the foods in which we've talked about today, and yams and all of these other foods, many of these are eliminated Because if they were to sit there for Christmas and have a banana and a potato, they would end up in the hospital because of elevated potassium levels. And so when we think in terms of diet and we're thinking about plant-based foods and all of these other things, it dramatically changes when an individual now starts on dialysis and has these this major chronic illness. Their diet is completely changed. So we're no longer talking about, well, diabetes and hypertension and what to eat. It is so much more severe that it's a major issue. And so when we look at that, now we look at high levels of non-compliance to medication as well as to diet.
So Dr. Maxey, Miss Tillery, this is such a challenge because, and I think Tony Wofford had something in the chat earlier about teaching people to shop, teaching people to eat. It wasn't exactly what he wrote, but that's what I pulled from it. These are there has to be a way for us to begin early with helping people. Dr. Maxey mentioned putting butter and sugar into baby food and that kind of thing. There has to be a way for us to develop the palate so that people have a taste for things that are healthy for them. And then we have to make sure things are available in our communities. I remember working in Washington, D.C. and having huge areas without a supermarket where you did have to shop at the corner store, something else that was in the chat from Mr. Wofford earlier. So high blood pressure doesn't hurt you as it's going up and as it's staying up. And so it hurts you when it's trying to kill you. Diabetes doesn't hurt you as you're getting out of control. It hurts you when it's trying to kill you. And by then it's sort of like you bend something and then when it breaks, you really can't put it back together again. So we get to a point that our livers are giving up, our kidneys are giving up, and now we're trying. Now the health, as you said earlier, Ms. Tillery, the importance of health goes from a 5 up to a 10, because now I'm about to die. And that's when it becomes a 10 and I'm paying attention. So I think all of this education is very important, and we have to find a way to interest people in it before their liver breaks or their kidney. and I'm just not sure how to do that.
I'm not saying, I'm not suggesting that I know the answer to that, but what I do know is education takes various forms.
Mhm.
And one of the most primitive forms is modeling. And once you, why are you laughing at me, Dr. Walks?
No, I'm smiling. I'm agreeing with you. You know, people say, well, do as I say, not as I do. They tell you to eat healthy and they got ribs in this hand and French fries in this hand.
Yeah. So again, I know I sound like a broken record on this, but I keep going back to what's happening in the home. And if you want to make an impact, that's where you're going to have to make an impact. And I will share with you, I participated in an effort, and I will not name the community. It was not Tennessee. I participated in a activity in a church where we were trying to drive it home. And it was a church that provided breakfast between the two services. This is way before COVID. We had large congregations, and we changed the menu that was being provided, and it lit up that church. And we tried to persevere, but the lesson I learned from that was how ingrained these behaviors have become. So we need to look at opportunities to model, as well as other forms of education everywhere we go, because it is pervasive and endemic in our community. The dietary choices we make, because it is part of our culture. And whenever you start trying to change culture, you got a major job ahead of you.
You know, I agree with both of you, Dr. Walks and Dr. Neighbor Stevens. And I'm going to use myself as an example. So the Lord was nice enough to let me celebrate 81 years. But I was raised by a loving family, mother and auntie, whose only fault to me was being born and raised in South Carolina. They were. So I enjoyed some of the best soul food from birth until now. Then I married into a Jamaican family, more soul food of a different flavor. So even though I went to medical school and studied cardiovascular medicine and know what's right and wrong, that inculcation or indoctrination, if you please, for all those years of my psyche and my psychology makes it very hard to follow my intelligence and not my gut and mind. So that's the problem that I think we have to broach as we raise these young kids. My grandson is very health conscious because his mother is. He's not had anything like meat yet, and he's very organic and very healthy. But his grandpa still likes everything that Dr. Walk said about ribs and French fries and whatnot. So, but that's a problem. That's a problem that we have to fight. And I'm not sure it's just education. We have to get inside people's head to do something like that. I'd appreciate some comments on that. That's my thought.
My thoughts are, is that I agree with all of you, but I also, Dr. Maxey, you and I we were in the church, and back in the 70s, I was doing food products at church and cooking at church and doing that. And as of, was part of the ministerial program at church and had invited, this is right before COVID, was doing many webinars and programs at the church on food, eating healthy and all types of subjects from diabetes. And Dr. Maxey was invited and was actually involved, as you recall, and we set up all of these programs. And as a dietitian, I prepared all of the foods, and still we had, the issue was that we had such a low turnout to be such a great program. And even there were ribs and different things in which we've actually done it because we had them smoked from a smoker and brought food in for people who could actually eat and try all of these various foods. But I found that with the church ministry, it wasn't as large as it could have been because it may not have been one of the top priorities for the ministers themselves versus that of faith-based in terms of the soul, not so much as we're thinking in terms of what we eat. And these programs that we developed were such just like this. I mean, we had speakers that were coming in and all of this, and food that was being taught and given for children as well during their different programs. But again, it is not something, it has to be fully supported by the church in order for them to fully understand. And many of the ministers, and some of them are very sick themselves, and they have not fully understood their health issues. So they don't put that as a top priority for the soul. Their biggest is on giving that message instead of in terms of the health. And that's my take and what I've actually experienced. However, for me, I believe in the totality of it all in order to, with the church ministry, is that it's very important of having healthy individuals, because part of having healthy individuals allow them to be soldiers to go out to also to tell other individuals about saving souls, which is part of the Great Commission of the church. But you have so many individuals who are also very sick. And it's difficult to go into trying to change that climate of producing healthy foods.
So,
Yes,
so Dr. Maxey, Dr. Straker has her hand up if we can.
Go ahead.
Unmute Dr. Straker. And then after that, Dr. Bean, Dr. Excelina Bean had put something in the chat, and maybe we can get a comment from Dr. Bean.
Okay.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all, as always, for a wonderful presentation and discussion. But there are a few points that I felt important, and several people have made them. I think that people do need to learn early the connection also between what you are eating and what your mental health status may be. If you are depressed, as many of the people, unfortunately, many people who are attending church for whatever the reason may be, are seeking to be soothed in a variety of ways. And unfortunately, we are losing our younger population in the church, population. So the issue of now removing the source of their food is more difficult, I believe, to address in that setting. But I also think that just teaching in general, why are you craving sugar? Why are you craving some of the foods that you may be craving? And whether or not that is a connection to what you have learned and what you know to soothe you. You know, I am a sugar girl when I am under stress. Or, feeling, depressed or something like that. Literally, if I eat a candy bar, I can go to sleep. If I cannot, get myself to get rest. So I know that connection so that I don't maintain that behavior in my life generally. But I do think that that is a very important factor in what you're trying to communicate to us. And I thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stryker. Who's next, Dr. Walks?
We were trying to get Dr. Bean to make a comment. I see Dr. Bean is still on mute. Oh, there we go, Dr. Bean.
Well, there are several things that I would like to say, and I love this discussion. It's always so fun. Let's start from the beginning. And you're absolutely correct. Theoretically, you could say, let's start with educating our children and our parents from the beginning. So as a pediatrician, that's one of the things that we attempt to do. Let's begin with just a discussion of breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, which, as you know, is one of the big issues. And I will tell you that when I first started talking about, I got interested in breastfeeding as a nutrient for use in the NICU because it decreased the incidence of necrotizing enterocolitis, or formula increased the incidence of necrotizing enterocolitis. So I didn't get into it from a therapeutic point of view of how wonderful breastfeeding was for babies. I got into it as a mechanism of trying to address a disease process. And by the way, the people who were the least supportive were the staff and the nurses, et cetera, in trying to promote breastfeeding. Now, that was 30-something years ago. We have taken, in 30-something years, we have gotten to the point now where we have pretty much managed to change the culture to decide that actually breastfeeding is as good as, if not better than, bottle feeding. And over that time period, we now have, and if you look at your population and you ask the question, were you breastfed? If you're above the age of 50, the answer is probably no. If you are above the age of 30, the answer is still probably no. But we have seen a shift. It's taken 20, 30 years, but we are beginning to see a shift in which our African-American population, which had the lowest incident and still has the lowest incident of breastfeeding, is beginning to decide, has now begun to accept the idea that actually breastfeeding is a good thing. So you can win the battle, so to speak.
Dr. Bean, can I ask you a question right there? Is it the milk that you're getting from the breast or is it the act of breastfeeding, or both?
It's the milk itself has an increase in the amount of antibodies, specific antibodies, something called secretory IgA. It also has some cells, et cetera. All of those things tend to be protective to the gut. There's some discussion about it, if it protects from developing, for example, sensitivities to other foods later on, whether it decreases the incidence of gut-related disease like inflammatory bowel disease, et cetera. Does it decrease the incidence of sensitivity to other foods later on? Does it end? So there's a whole bunch of things that involve. Now, it also helps to promote maternal infant bonding as well. And so that's become as another issue as well. But for example, another example is WIC. Everybody believes in free food. You poor, anybody gonna give you something free, you taking it. All right. Not only that, if the government's giving it to you for free, it must be better. Why would I breastfeed when I can go get these vouchers and go out and buy a bunch of formula? Okay. So consequently, it took maybe about 15 years before WIC finally decided that if you were breastfeeding, for example, you could keep your WIC after you were born, after the baby was born. So instead of the mother having to give up her WIC and you have to get WIC for the baby, now the mother can keep her WIC. All right. So but those are fights you have to battle. And I've been doing this for over 30 something years to get to this particular point. And CMS now makes it one of the quality measures, one of the criteria for certification of hospitals is the percentage of patients who are breastfed only. And I will tell you, practically no institutions meet that criteria because as this particular point. Now, then you get culture in there. So we talked about African Americans being the least likely to breastfeed. Hispanics have the highest instance of beginning breastfeeding, but it has now become culturally appropriate because they get these WIC coupons to build that. Now you start arguing about whether it is culturally appropriate. I've actually had arguments that with Hispanics, it is culturally appropriately to be both breast and bottle feeding. So now they have gone from being considered where they were before to being acculturated that says everybody does breast and bottle feeding. And I will tell you a little bit, breastfeeding is better than that. But that's become the cultural norm for a Hispanic patient, that you should do both breast and bottle. And then we have our society, which does not support it because poor people got to go, if they're lucky, got a job. And women have to go back to work. And very, very few places support breastfeeding in the workplace. We don't. I did at King. At King, we had they could come, doctors, anybody could come. We had in the nursery, we had a room where you could come and do breastfeeding, express milk and all of that kind of stuff. National General Hospital doesn't have one. So even the concept, Meharry Medical College doesn't even consider it. And I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying this is where we are. So 30 years ago, we set that up to be supported in King. Most places in LA are a little bit more than that, but National General doesn't even have it. And I'm sure that if you look at your relationship in your institution, you did not support the idea of breastfeeding. And even with ours, it was mostly, since you had to be working at the hospital, it was almost always residents, doctors, and other and nurses, et cetera. The people who cleaned up the floors weren't coming in there to express no breast milk. So our population, they got to go back to work. So trying to educate them to express milk. Insurance companies don't pay for a breast pump. Okay? They give you that little manual thing that doesn't work. They don't pay for an electric one. That's one of the things I gave my niece when she got pregnant. I bought her, one of my presents to her was I paid for her breast pump, and she had insurance. She had good insurance. She worked for the county of Los Angeles, but they didn't pay for breast pump. So we're not even going to talk about how hard it is if you decide to try to do that for patients who are on Medicaid. Now, but we've seen some improvement in trying to delay introduction of solid foods. So, which is now recommended to be about 6 months of age. And we are beginning to make some progress in terms of people actually not feeding babies solid foods on day one of life. It used to be the norm, and especially in the African American community, that you would start solid foods on babies, and by the time they were a month old, and they had this little foolishness that said by starting them on solid food that they slept better during the night and didn't wake you up in the middle of the night. Now, you obviously had to be bottle feeding anyway, because breastfeeding is every 2 or 3 hours, and they were going to wake you up in the middle of the night. But remember that? And some of you must have been around when that was the thing. You start feeding them by the time they would form, all the grandmothers pushing this concept that you had to start feeding them before by the time they were 2 or 3 weeks old, you start feeding them because you want to sleep through the night. All right, we're finally beginning to see we have managed to push that away. And we're beginning to see that people are not understand that you do not start, and we're recommending up to 6 months that we're doing. And we're getting to see that even among our African-American population. So in our 20-somethings up to our early 30s, some of these concepts have changed. The advantage, as Dr. Maxey would say, of being around long enough, you finally begin to see some benefits of the education that we're trying to do. School lunches. Ketchup is a vegetable. Okay? So I'm just saying, when you look at, there are so many places we can begin to look at. How many of you think that they teach much in the way of nutrition in most schools nowadays?
No, they don't.
They don't teach them. They
No.
don't have them. They don't have them available. But then we just move up. We won't even discuss adolescents and the fact that we do nothing with them. We won't discuss the obesity rate. And I will finish and let somebody else say something. But I just did my well woman visit. They spent a whole lot of time asking me about my sex life, but nobody asked me what I ate for breakfast. They didn't know, but if you looked at my BMA, you should have been asking me. You looked at my hemoglobin, they didn't even point out. I looked at my own lab. They didn't even point out that my hemoglobin A1C was too high. They did not point out the fact that my BMI was too high. Okay, so I actually went in anticipating having to justify the fact that my hemoglobin A1C had gone up, and to justify the fact that my BMI too high. But they had a little questionnaire they filled out. The Medicaid questionnaire had a whole bunch of other questions on it, but nobody seemed to have noticed or had time, and I will do this, not a bad doctor, had time to actually address any of those issues. So I don't know how if we have our healthcare system at this point is set up, that is not set up to promote healthy living and healthy. They give lip service. We as healthcare providers give lip service to it, but the structure of our healthcare system is set up so that we do not do this. We don't have access to a dietitian for diabetics who are out of control. We don't, and the healthcare insurance don't pay for it. TennCare don't pay for it, but neither does your private insurance. And they don't take Medicaid. So I'm just saying that our healthcare system does not promote this. So I've given 2 messages. Number one, we have been able to make some progress in my lifetime. We've made some progress in terms of changing the behavior of the populations that we serve. And in our 20s and 30-year-olds are a whole lot different than our 50 and 60-year-olds, and our 41s probably in between. But that there's a whole long way to go in terms of trying to change the structure of our healthcare system to promote the kind of healthy living and things that we know that people should be doing. I eat my turnip greens are now cooked with turkey. And said I had to give up the ham, and I've learned to like it. Okay, different, but I learned to like it. Now, I will point out my mother lived to be 92 years old, and she cooked it with ham all of her life. So there's a whole bunch of things that are engaged in this as we know. Anyway, but it's really a great discussion. Thank you very much for letting me say something.
We love your discussion, and you're going to get a letter from me in the next few days asking what day in January you're going to address us. Dr. Bean is chair of pediatrics at Meharry Medical College. They stole her from Los Angeles. And would love to have her back on the Black Health Trust to address us. And Dr. Neighbor Stevens gonna make sure I get that letter to you and it's typed right. Are there any other questions or comments in the chat, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Walks?
There was a point that I don't think we really addressed, and I'd love Ms. Tillery to comment on the whole issue of portion size.
Of
I'm
what?
sorry.
Portion size.
Okay.
Portion size is extremely important. And again, the reason why is because we want to help someone to prevent from overeating. And so when we think in terms of what a portion is, a 3-ounce portion or a 4-ounce portion, then you have like you could do a plate. You could say, well, okay, this is 4-ounce portions of this. This is for meats and vegetables, to ensure that you're going to get a variety of food and the amount of portions. Again, portion sizes are also to be considered when you think in terms of the individual's size. Okay, so you can't say, okay, well, everybody is going to eat 4 ounces of meat and a half a cup of vegetables. Well, we have to make sure that there's some sense of satiety with their meals. And so portion size are important, but you need to really consider portion sizes for each individual on an individual basis. And that's my opinion of it. I can't say, well, I want you to go eat 4 ounces of this, a half a cup of this, and then you walk away and you're still hungry. So there should be some meals and snacks in between. It's based upon the portion's height and weight, what they're eating. And you really get that from the history in which you're actually talking with the individual, their lifestyle, their health, what they're actually doing, the activities, and all of these things. All of this is actually done on an individual basis, more or less than just a generalized and saying, eat 4 ounces. When you're saying eat, is it based upon 1,200 calories? Is it based upon 2,000 calories? Is it based upon 2,400 calories? So a lot of that, there are many generalized in which we have, especially for diabetics and other individuals with health issues, and especially diabetics when you're looking at what portions they should be eating with each meal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Maxey. Dr. Clark raised her hand.
Dr. Clark?
Yes, quick question. You mentioned that you like to hold patients accountable for weighing. So how often do you encourage them to weigh, and are you for or against weighing every day?
I'm pretty much for weighing every day because it gives you pretty much an average, and especially when you have certain individuals who have medical problems, you can really detect if you have fluid weight versus solid weight. For example, I just changed my diet up and I was trying some new products. And so I put on, start taking a little bit more protein. When I got on the scale, I was 145 pounds. At 2 or 3 days later, I was 151 pounds. I said, now I haven't eaten that much. I haven't changed. So again, I'm saying this is, my muscle mass is starting to change. So, but weighing yourself every day is extremely important in the morning before you put on your clothes, before anything. And then you have part of your health history, taking your measurements. Now I think what I'm really saying is be an advocate for your own health. You know what your weight is, you can see the difference. And so really when you become your best advocate, that means you go to the doctor, you're going to know about your health. You're going to ask the right questions and what to say. But weighing is extremely important, and also know that muscle weighs more than fat. And examine your feet. If you're diabetics, looking for edema, looking for swelling, looking for all of those things. When you're noticing your hands, look at your entire body. And then that gives you a little bit more noticeable interest in your own health. And that moves your health from a scale of 5 to up to a 10.
Thank you.
And Dr. Sherrod's hand was raised, and Dr. Maxey, I think we are at that point where you start to tell us that we're running out of time.
Yeah, I just want to
Neighbor.
say that I wanted to bring up eating for your blood type and wondering whether there is any value to that. And I wanted to give accolades to my sister, Dr. Bean, for telling it like it is. We have a major systemic challenge to just being healthy.
That's true. Ms. Tillery?
Eating for your blood type. I was wondering if the nutritionist, Miss Tillery, knows anything about that. And, you know, I'm a type A and I really don't have any value for meat except for poultry and fish.
There was
Always
a
eat.
There was
Yeah.
a book that was actually out about eating for your blood types. And then in the research, it indicated that there was no true validity that your blood type was going to make a difference in your overall health, insofar as there was not enough adequate research or anything that indicated that if you were AB or A or O, that this was going to improve your health overall. And so that was from the book in which there was out, and that book has probably been out over 20, 25 years ago on the blood type diet. And that's pretty much the take on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Dr. Walsh, as you say, we're at that time. We need to bid everybody goodbye. I'd like to ask our speaker, Ms. Tillery, if you have any final comments before we go watch football. Ms. Tillery?
My final, I really appreciate this opportunity. And again, I am a big advocate for health. I've been around in the health industry for a long time. When she mentioned about not having that many dietitians, I think she was so correct that in the elementary schools in so many areas. And so that's really an area in which we really looked to really have an area where we really need to advocate for more healthcare workers, and especially those in the field of nutrition and dietetics. It is a very extensive area, but we're not really seeing that many dietitians that are actually coming up. And Dr. Maxey, as you know, that I've been in the dialysis now for 18 years. And when I initially started, I was the basically only one. And we're going from here to all the way to San Diego County. And I think now there's about 2 of us. I will soon be getting ready to come out. But I think that there's definitely needs to be a greater area of concern in healthcare when we're looking for dietitians, and for them to advocate that in all programs that you want to be able to have a dietitian or make referrals to dietitians so that they can really spend time with individuals and teaching them, and especially even in the elementary schools, that there needs to be more programs where dietitians and food services are available, especially for children.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Tillery. I really appreciate you. And let it be known that I'm going to retain you to come help me with my new diet and new awareness. Dr. Walsh, any final comments?
My final comment, Dr. Maxey, has to do with the fact that I remember there was once a time when everybody smoked and recycling wasn't even a word. And the Stop Smoking, Recycling campaigns went to schools, and kids learned about that and took it home. And when I was health officer, we put school nurses in each of the schools. And I think that it goes back to voting. We have to be willing to advocate for and vote people into office who are going to set the policies that will allow dietitians and dietary instruction to go into our schools. Because when I sat on the State Board of Education, I remember we could put things into the curriculum and we could mandate things be in the curriculum. And there's absolutely no reason why kids can't learn their math and their reading using things that are relevant to their health. You can absolutely write word problems with health content. So we don't have to choose one or the other. So again, my final comment is, it goes back to us advocating for the people that make the policies that govern our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Dr. Neighbor Stevens.
Oh, I'm still just resonating on what Dr. Walsh just said. I'm going back to my use your common sense. As I observe the numbers going up with all 3 of the respiratory viruses afflicting the country at this time, I'm hearing rumblings of certain cities and states contemplating reinstitution of mask mandates. You know, don't wait for them to finally have the political courage to do what needs to be done. Take care of yourself and use common sense.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Neighbor Stevens. And my final comment is medical only in a distant sense. First, want to thank Ms. Tillery for being our guest speaker for today. But my hat is off to Reverend Raphael Warnock. I don't know what political party he belongs to, but he ran a race and got elected as a senator for a full 6-year term from Georgia. And I know he's focused on the health of Black people, and whatever they did down there to pull that off, I'm for it. And I thank them and I thank the Lord for it. Everybody have a good day, a good afternoon, a good Sunday. And for the Medical Advisory Committee, we're going to have a meeting on the 21st of the month. That is the Wednesday, I'm sorry, not the 21st, but the week after that. What is that, Dr. Neighbor Stevens?
Well, that would be the 28th.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll be getting letters out and we'll have a good topic. And we'll also proceed that with a small group meeting on that nutritional project that we talked about before. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.